Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mundane Matt, here with a story for you that not gonna lie, is gonna be kind of hard to discuss, mostly because of the implications of what it's about, right? You have a child who has a neurodegenerative illness, and it is causing her multiple trips to the hospital. She's getting sick constantly. Her body is failing. The likelihood of survival is a long and painful road, if even at all. So, what do? Right? Well, in the case of Julianne Snow, a 5-year-old girl here out of Portland, her mother, who is a doctor, and her father, who's an Air Force pilot, offered her a choice. And they offered her either help or heaven. And she chose heaven. She chose to go be with God. Now, we've heard of stories like this before, right? Where the parents denied medical help to their child because of religious beliefs. And when that happened, the child died, people mocked and ridiculed and criticized the parents because it was negligent. But in this case, the parents took her to the hospital frequently. The doctors told them that the likelihood of coming back to normal, the likelihood of getting through it is going to be small, and the likelihood of a long and painful road ahead is going to be high. And they just couldn't, they didn't want their daughter to go through that. So they talked to her about getting help or going to heaven. And I'm not sure how I feel about this story, because when I first read the headline, I was upset. I was relatively infuriated at what I could only determine to be the insensitivity of the parents, of how dare you put religion over your child's health. But then I read the story, and it wasn't like they neglected her. It wasn't like they neglected her in the name of the fucking holy book or some deity named Chuck or something. They took her to the hospital. They got her the help that they thought they could get her, but ultimately it was a losing battle, and they just kind of gave her the right to die. Oregon is a state that has a right to die law. People come here, they move here specifically to commit suicide. It's kind of weird and morbid, but that's the law. There's a great documentary on Netflix about it titled Right to Die, and it's hard to get to the end of that thing and not just feel like gutted but also understanding of why the person that they chose to document did what she did. So in this story, I'm thinking, like, does a 5-year-old understand the implications, understand the consequences of what is going to happen as a result of this? Does that child understand what she is agreeing to? And I don't think that they do. To be honest with you, I don't think that they do. I don't think you can go to a child and ask them, do you want help or do you want heaven? Because a child is going to be experiencing the pain of illness and that neurodegenerative disease and everything. And that's going to be there. And they're going to be in a lot of pain. And that is their life. All they know is that suffering. And so telling them heaven, telling them about heaven, what heaven means, what we're taught when we go to church. When I went to church, heaven was described as a glorious, wondrous place where you'll never feel pain or sorrow or sadness ever again. That you're always like that, like that cheerleader Becky that's peppy as fuck. Or you're always like that, right? That's what I heard when I was younger. When I got older, heaven was described to me as something entirely different. My Bible teacher or Sunday school teacher described it as everyone gets like a big ass like conga line of sorts, right? But like going the opposite direction. And what you do is you talk to somebody and you hear their life story. And then then you tell them your life story. By the time you both finish and you move to the next person, you just kind of keep going. And then when you round around again, you're going to forget that person's life story. Which I thought was like very interesting, but also kind of boring as shit. I was also 15 and really only cared about video games and masturbation. So for me, it wasn't, my idea and understanding of heaven was very skewed based on who had told me their interpretation of it, right? So this mother and her husband must have taught their daughter what they believe their version of heaven is. And so if all of our versions of heaven are different simply because we have no way of understanding or knowing what heaven is, Is it effectively lying to the child in order to get her to choose death over life? Because the sweet relief that comes from the idea of heaven is far more inviting and enticing when your entire life is focused around pain and illness and essentially suffering. So I don't necessarily fault the parents for putting their child in that position. I don't think it might have been the right way of doing it, but I don't necessarily fault them. They look at their child is suffering, their child's in pain. What do? How do they solve it? And after years of it, you don't really know what to do. There's nothing you can do. And you're being told that this is a losing battle. So they let the child have the right to die, to make that choice. Part of me then wonders, and this is where I just have to wonder in the back of their head, was this something they wanted? Now, before you get all mad at me in the comments about that, I'm not trying to say they didn't love their child. I'm not trying to suggest they had their child's ill will at heart. I'm not trying to suggest anything like that. But it's one question I've asked people when they have been full-time caregivers for a loved one and that person passes. I ask them, do you feel free? And it's a very dark and morbid question to ask somebody, but the question is usually answered the same. And that answer is yes. Yes, I feel free. I'm finally free. And it's not that they love the person any less, that they want the person to die, but their life is literally on hold for somebody else who is losing a battle. And when that battle is finally over, they then can move on with their existence. And I'm wondering if the parents subconsciously were in the same position. Because I can't say that if I had a child in the same position, that I wouldn't feel that when it was all said and done. I can't say that because I think part of me would mourn my child completely, but also go, it's time to grieve and move on and not to be beholden to this pain. And I just wonder if that plays part into it. Now, look, at the end of this thing, my heart does completely go out to the family. It does. Losing a child at that age, having them be sick for all those years, cannot be easy. And I hope that they're able to find the peace and happiness in the next phase and chapter of their life. But I just feel that when talking about help or heaven to a 5-year-old, that there are far more things at play than what is just presented to us as the straightforward narrative. That there's people's own personal motivations, either conscious or subconscious. And it's a sad story overall. But really, what are your thoughts on this? How would you handle it? Would you allow your child to make the decision to end their life, to end their suffering? Would you hold on and fight with them along, through it all, hoping that they come out on the other side? Or would you just let them succumb and then just go from there? And I think it's a hard question to ask, and I think it's a hard question to answer, and it requires us to look very deep inside our own self and our own psyche and our own conscience to make that choice. And so I cannot fault the parents in this case, because I feel that to them probably was simply the hardest choice they'll ever have to make, because they ultimately had to frame that existence, that reality to their child, and put it in a way where then she would then make that choice. And I can't think of anything more sad from a parent's perspective than that.